I'm Zenon Skripchek, and today we're here with Theatre Express. We are at the Etobicoke School of the Arts in their mini-theatre. Today we're going to take a look at William Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. William Shakespeare.
Thank you, it's nice being here.
3rd, 1564.
Hello and welcome to Art at the Civic Center. My name is Gillian Roos and I'm going to be host for the next half hour. The Civic Center Art Committee, a hard-working group of people who bring exhibitions to Etobicoke every month at the Civic Center Gallery. They can be exhibitions of artists from the States, from Europe, from across Canada. And this month we're a little closer to home in that the Humber Valley Club is exhibiting here for the month of right from today right up until June the 21st. The Humber Valley are a group of people who formed their group around the early 50s. There are about 100 members in the group, and they work every Wednesday, and they meet at the Humber Valley United Church. They have a varied selection of artists come each month to work with them, and so you can be working with different artists throughout the year. They've already had one exhibition this year at the St. Lawrence Center, and then they're exhibiting, of course, at the Civic Center Art Gallery for this next month. Our guest in the studio tonight with us is Mr. John McGregor, and he's going to be talking with some of the artists who are members of the Humber Valley Club and who have their art exhibited at the Civic Center. Mr. McGregor is an artist. He comes from England. He came here in 1949 when he was just a young fellow. And he studied at York Memorial College and the Central Technical School in Toronto. He has his work shown in many different exhibitions in Boston in 1970 and in Yugoslavia in 1972, in Paris, France in 73. And also he's represented in collections at the National Gallery of Canada, the Art Gallery of Ontario, and the Canada Council Art Bank. This is just to name a few. And of course his teaching positions, he's taught at the Artists' Workshop, the Ontario College of Art, and York University.
Hello, John. Thanks for being with us today. As a juror, could you give us a little bit of advice on the artists in Etobicoke who get rejected from shows?
First of all, it's not easy to judge a show like this. In fact, I've been on Canada Council juries and various other things, and I find this more difficult. And I think one of the reasons is because of the maybe the continuity, the lack of the type of diversity that you would have maybe by submissions to the Canada Council. And it was hard. I just want to say that. The other thing is, as far as being rejected is concerned, I had to make a statement in the opening of the show here. And what I said here was that that I hope that out there, that the people who have been rejected from the show, that they will not hold it against me personally. I even stated the fact that some of the works that were rejected, and many of them that were accepted, some of the quality, the technique, whatever, was better than some of the things that I could do, okay? Even though I'm a professional artist, I realize that other people have been working for years on a particular subject matter and a certain technique, and they have developed that technique to a high degree, to a good quality. Now, as far as the people who are rejected are concerned, one woman I can remember, she was very angry at me. And I think personally that she's got to realize that no matter who judges her work, that even though the person might be somewhat qualified, they can make mistakes, but it's not just mistakes. I tried to get the idea that people should not be painting in terms of competition. They should be painting not to compete against others and not to compete against themselves either. They should be painting to find themselves and to touch others. And I think that's true. And got to get your priorities straight,
Yes,
okay?
very,
That's
very
about
true.
it. And I would state that those who have been rejected, now I've been rejected from many things too. I've submitted for Academy Council grants, Ontario Arts Council grants, sculpture commissions, and it hurts me, my ego. But I've learned that you can't carry this vindictiveness in you because it burns energy. It burns a spiritual
You don't have the energy
a
for
social.
painting.
Exactly right. Not just for painting, for living.
That, which is
Which is what
part
it's
of it.
about,
Yes,
right on.
That's right,
Okay.
exactly.
So that's my whole feeling about the type of rejection, the emotional thing that will happen after that.
Good. John, you've been very helpful. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot of help from that. It's opened up a lot to me, too. Thank you. We're going to meet one of our artists right now. So let's go to Marion Bainbridge, and you're going to talk with her about her painting in the show.
Hi, Marion. Now, you've got one of the most interesting pictures in the show, not necessarily the best painted, technically. And a lot of it has to do with the symbolism. And this is one of the reasons why, in fact, we almost rejected, the other adjudicator myself, we almost rejected the work. And then we decided to accept it because of the symbols that we were putting in for the painting. We noticed that there was smokestacks and then there was industry in the background.
Right,
and
right.
the foreground had a tree.
Rocks and a tree on
lush
it, yes.
tree. Why did you decide to use those symbols? What did they mean to you?
Well, actually, I painted this picture for the sesquicentennial last year. And we were supposed to have a show down at the market downtown. And, of course, I couldn't submit it because it was in Mississauga. I was in Etobicoke. This is supposed to be all done for Etobicoke. But I didn't realize there was a border between Mississauga and Etobicoke. So I was in Etobicoke, but the picture was in Mississauga. So I couldn't submit it in the show, you see. Right. And that was the reason why I painted that picture. We were looking all over for something for Etobicoke show.
I see that the division, am I right in thinking to some degree, the division between nature and something that's man-made, so to speak,
right?
And
yes.
like the industry, and how there might that nature is somewhat threatened, like with the tree to the, was it to the right hand?
To the right, yes. Yeah.
Now that tree, if one looks into that tree, they can see almost, in a sense, something sublimated or hidden, as if
right.
there's a
yes,
person's face or
yes,
emotion.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
And I felt there was, the tree is lush to some degree, but at the same time, it seems to be falling slightly. You know, but there's more optimism in the picture than I find than there's something negative. But that symbolism is there. That's what I read into it, and I thought that was a profound statement. Now the technique is something else, you know, but the actual statement, as opposed to a lot of other things in the show, you came out with something different.
I see. Do you think that maybe the industry should have been more in the fog? It seemed to me after you had mentioned it that it was just a little too close, too dark for the...
Well, it's not necessarily the flat surface. That's not what bothered me so much. It's the disparity, the division between, and not only symbolically, but aesthetically, and this has a lot to do with maybe the way you feel about it, that it is so divided. But I believe a painting shouldn't also state a problem. It should resolve a problem.
Oh,
and
yes.
somehow you've left us with a
something,
problem.
yeah, I see
you know,
what
you've
you
left
mean,
the
yes,
viewer with a
right.
real problem, and you haven't really, in a sense, showed us a way out.
Oh, I see.
And that's not necessarily bad, but in this case, I would say aesthetically, which means also in some ways emotionally or philosophically, whatever you want, that we are still divided. Okay, we as people, as a community, are still divided between those two worlds, and we haven't really have something that's compatible, something that's joining those two things together. I'm with Isabella Agnew here, and Isabella, you've got probably one of the few paintings that we could select from in terms of subject matter. It was a child, a beautiful painting of a child. And I was very moved by that painting for a lot of reasons. One of them, because I think technically it's a good painting. Aesthetically, it's tactile. You've let the surface live, so to speak, in terms of its painting quality. But also something very else that's extremely important to me is the fact that the subject matter is a child, as opposed to being flowers, which we have so many of in the show, or landscapes.
Right.
You picked a human being at a particular age. Could you tell me, would that be a member of your family, or?
Yes, it's one of my grandchildren. I'm very close to him, and I've had many happy times with him. He's got a lovely personality. I just wanted to paint him, and that was the end result. I just decided I've painted one other grandson, but it was a profile. I found this a little more difficult because it was a full face to get the expression. And I felt that there were parts of it that were not loose the way I would have liked it. In order to get the correct expression, I had to go back and go into it and get a little expression around the eyes that I knew were his. And so that I had a feeling that perhaps I overworked it. Did you have that feeling when you look at it?
Maybe in some ways, but I felt that because of the freeness and the softness and the quality that you brought, that's what kept the work together. And that's what
Art, painting a certain kind of a picture has something to do with the experiences you've had. I love to paint at Georgian Bay, where I spend the summer, and the more I'm there, the more I like to paint it, because it seems as if it's part of me. So I believe that about painting. I really hadn't looked at it that way, but I really do believe that.
The third person we have here is Peggy Johnston. Peggy, you've got a very interesting painting in the show. When we looked at the work at first, we passed by it, and we had to come back, I believe, a second and third time as to decide whether or not to put your work on the show. And I was convinced it should be in the show because it was unique, it was different, and in a sense that not only the way it was the painting, the way you handled the painting, the material, but also the subject matter. Now, you've done something which is probably more interesting than a lot of the other works in the show. You've married two very extreme worlds in terms of art history. You've looked at the new, and you've also looked at the very old. And somehow you've combined those two elements together. Could you explain to myself and to the people out there as to
Why?
why did you do this? What were you looking for?
I admire the expressionists and the fast. And most of the others I had no room for. I'm one of those people. And therefore I studied in England at the Bristol and West Academy before you were born. And then about 12 years ago I went over to Paris and I studied over there. And I've also studied here with Henri Masson and Paul Schroeder
Fascinating.
and Jack Pollock. A few others, but those are the ones I really think I got something from.
Okay, that's interesting.
These
Exciting.
are the people that like
What
different
does
work.
the painting say? What is it trying to say, as opposed to maybe somebody who did some flowers or something nature, or somebody who just painted their grandchild? What is your painting trying to state? What does it say?
I like emotion,
Emotion.
color, movement. I think subject matter is unimportant.
You do,
I
eh?
think I'm just the opposite to you.
Oh, I've done non-representational works of art myself, where the subject matter was all
I love emotion in a picture that it can be horrible or absolutely wonderful. But as long as you have an emotion, that pleases me.
Okay, now I agree with you, but can I add something?
Yeah?
I'll tell you what I personally see from what I can understand. Yes, there's emotional statements there, but the social statement is important. That's what a lot of people don't realize about certain abstract forms of art, is that the emotional statement. Now, the representational works in the show, things that we can very quickly recognize, photographic if you want, I think those things represent a period of time of how to look at a human being, a certain social way, as an individual. It was born out of the Renaissance or whatever. I'm going to try to make this quick. But what I see in your painting is trying to bridge, trying to marry that world into maybe a futuristic world, a world where people are more collective in a sense. They're more, in a sense, a part of each other, especially in cities where you have implosion, large concentrations of people now. People have to start understanding each other. And this flat space, and that's the thing I notice most about your picture, is this horrendous flat space. It is not the space of the pioneer, the space of the cowboy, if you want, that goes on forever. It is basically a contracted space that you would have in the city. So, and it's interesting to note you've got symbols of nature in that contracted space. So again, it's like the person we first showed, it's nature and, in a sense, modern life coming together, trying to be married. And I think that's what intrigued me most about that work.
I admire Emily Carr so much.
Carr has
love
that
her
space. Carr has that same kind of space. And she traveled abroad, didn't she, too? She's been to Paris.
Oh, she painted with the Favre in France.
Right.
I didn't realize that, but I always knew I loved her work.
And that's when European population increased at a rapid rate, and you get this very contracted social space. And it's now Canada's turn, so to speak, we have to now start living in this type of space. The fourth person we have here is Elizabeth Jaworski. Elizabeth, you've got an interesting painting on the show. It's well executed, technically, but the colors are beautiful. The handling of the material is quite nice. But the subject matter is also interesting. I noticed that it's we're talking about the painting of yours, the washing line. Okay. I would like to know, where did you go? Is it downtown Toronto by chance?
Yes, it is.
What area of Toronto is it?
Basically the Dupont and Bathurst area. I go to Framer down that way, and you go back and forth every so often, and you see all kind of things. It's my old neighborhood, really. I grew up down that way, so I have a lot of warm feelings for there.
Have you ever painted pictures of suburbia in Etobicoke here, like we were talking about the mundane boringness, the repetitiveness of the front of a building maybe, and maybe the lack of character. But I noticed in the show that a thing that was omitted, and it was surprising me, because an individual, a lot of feelings and places go through their mind, but a lot of you people live here, and I was so surprised not to see the houses, the streets where their children play, the houses which your husbands come home to or whatever, and I didn't see any of that in the show. Have you depicted yourself any of these images?
Well, I find that the aluminum siding doesn't turn me on.
Isn't that interesting?
And I like the old, well, as I say, my mother still lives downtown, and I go that way all the time, and it's really just another part of my life. And I don't think I'll ever really not love to go down there. And maybe someday I'll feel the same way. Maybe if I move back to downtown Toronto, I'll enjoy painting the suburbs.
The fifth person we have on the program here is Julius Populus. Now, Julius, your painting is an interesting painting, and what I know about you, you're also a very interesting man. And you've not only been a painter, which you are now, but you were an engineer a good part of your life.
Yes, I was.
And could you explain how an engineer decides to paint, or was the engineer a painter before he was an engineer?
Well, when I came to Canada, I worked for a large outfit that builds hydroelectric power stations, and I was sent up north. And there was lots of free time on my hands, so to use up that Saturdays and Sundays, I started to paint. And that was up at James Bay, which is just quite a bit of in the wilds.
You have very large projects to work on.
It's a power station, fair size, yes.
And you painted. Did you paint watercolors or oils?
No, I started with oils right away. There was the landscape is very exciting up north. It's not like here. It's wild, and that was about 25 years ago. So when I came back, I kept on. I studied with professionals, and lately with the Humber Valley Club, and that's where I am now.
Now, the painting you've got in the show, the reason why myself and the other judge selected it was because of the painting, like the actual quality, the tactile, the softness, the lushness of your oils, the light that was coming in to this market area, if I'm right. Could you explain that painting to us, please?
Well, I paint landscapes and still lifes, but my favorite subject is cityscapes.
Cityscape.
Because I am urbanite from way back. I always lived in big cities, and I like city life where there's concentration of human constructions. There's edifices, there are bleak, there are slums, and there are castles. And they are so close together, and the variety and the difference between the castle and the slum is exciting to me as an artist.
Right.
You don't find that in nature that concentrated. So that's why cities, to me anyway, are so excuse me, so nice so exciting to paint.
Now, I remember your paintings going back several years, but the paintings you did then were thicker, more impasto, and darker. And what I noticed about the works in this show is that the light and the color and they seem to be softer and not necessarily impressionistic, but the color has changed a lot. Could you tell me why that's occurred in this painting?
Well, I use the color scheme that fits my purpose best. And in old cities like this painting we are discussing, it's an old city, and cities have smugs,
Right.
and the buildings are old. So there's gray colors, and that reflects the mood of what I wanted to portray best. Very restricted palette, and there are some light coming through, but it's subdued.
The last person we're going to interview on the program is Susan Schellenberg. And Susan, I went through the show very quickly initially, before the works were hung, before I even started to adjudicate the works. And I literally froze when I saw your work. In fact, I sat down and I had a tea and I kept looking at the work, and your work especially, and that one piece that you submitted. I couldn't, the painting itself is a good painting, but it goes beyond being just a good painting, and that's the magic of that painting. It says something about being human. That's what I feel about that painting. Not the composition of the people, that's all fine, but the feeling of people together. Could you explain, and probably you could explain a lot better than what I know about the painting, could you explain in your own words what that painting means to you?
Yes, well, to sum it up first, I call it a Last Supper that includes women, because it seems to be the Last Supper motif of people around a table. We had a sesquicentennial show, and the theme was life in the suburbs. And so I had to paint something that I knew, and I had taught English to New Canadians.
So is that person you in that painting?
Well, I'll tell you about her. It wasn't meant to be, but people do ask me if it's me. I knew the Madonna on the left is Shida. I knew her. I knew Joseph, the next one, but I didn't teach the others. The teachers gave me slides of the class to work from. And I drew for 4 months because I had studied a bit of the Last Supper and dramatically,
Leonardo da Vinci.
yes, and the moment in the Last Supper is, verily one of you will betray me. And I was told that in a figurative work like that you had to have a dramatic moment. So the moment in this is when the teacher has brought in vegetables to teach the people how to go shopping, and the Madonna says, beets. And then I thought, what happens to everybody when the Madonna says beets? And I thought, she's proud of herself, so she lets go of her child. The child hears his mother's words, they go into him, he learns, and there's the child has his finger up to the mother's mouth. And I thought I had to keep them all isolated because they couldn't speak. So they had to be psychologically isolated. They had to be unified by the event. Mm-hmm. And then it had to work into a composition. When I got to the teacher, I thought, I had pictures of teachers from the class, and none of their gestures seemed to work in the composition. And I drew teachers till they were coming out of my head. And then one morning I got up about 6 o'clock and I was thumbing through Michelangelo and I saw his Libyan Sibyl and I thought, that's my teacher. So I took the book out of her hand and put in a beet on the one hand. I thought of Eve. I put the beet on the one hand and the apple on the other. And if you'll notice, the Madonna's a triangle this way, and the teacher is a triangle this way, and I didn't consciously do that, but when I was finished, I thought, well, the one triangle on top of another means wholeness, and so it just sort of happened that way.
It's a beautiful painting, and the statement of the self.
That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. The Civic Center Art Committee brings you exciting art to view at the Civic Center Art Gallery. Do make sure you get out to see it this month, right up until June the 21st. The Civic Center Art Gallery is open weekdays and on Saturday and Sunday and holidays from 2 until 5. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
The Etobicoke
with the sun, then everything I look on seemeth green. Pardon, I pray thee.
Do,
my
Lord
bad
Grandsire.
mistaking.
And with all make known which way thou travellest, if along with us, we shall be joyful of thy company.
Fair sir, and you, my merry mistress, that with your strange encounter much amaze me. My name is Corvincentio, my dwelling Pisa, and bound I am for Padua, there to visit a son of mine, which long I have not seen.
What is his name?
Lucentio, gentle sir.
Happily met! The happier for thy son. And now by law, as well as reverend age, I may entitle thee my loving father. The sister to my wife, this gentlewoman. Thy son by now hath married. Make it no wonder. Be not grieved. She is of good birth, her dowry wealthy. Besides, so qualified as may become the spouse of any noble gentleman. Let me embrace old Vincenti. And wonder we to see thy honest son, who shall by thy arrival be full joyous.
But is this true? Or is it else your pleasure, like pleasant travellers, to break a jest upon the company you avoid?
No, no, sir, I do assure thee so it is.
Yes. Come along and see the truth thereof. For I'm afraid our first merriment hath made thee jealous.
Well, Petruchio, this hath put me in heart. Have my widow, and if she be forward, then hast thou taught Hortensio to be untoward.
Now, the final monologue, the one that all the feminists and maybe some of the females in the audience here dislike.
Okay. What we're going to witness in the last scene that we're going to see is Kate's last speech in the play. What has preceded this scene is everybody has gotten together. We've resolved the subplot. Bianca has married the real Lucentio. Hortensio has married his widow, the one that he indicated he was going to try and tame himself at the end of the road scene. Everybody's there for a banquet. Petruchio, who has seen Kate start to come around but is still not sure where she's standing, sets up even more tests for her. At one point, all the women leave, and the men decide that they're going to see which wife is the most obedient. Hortensio sends for his widow, and she says, "No, I'm not coming." Lucentio sends for Bianca and says, "No, you have some game. I'm not going to come either." Petruchio says, "Command Kate to come." Lo and behold, Kate shows up on the scene. Everybody is totally aghast. At that point, Petruchio is almost totally convinced Kate has been awakened, if you will. He goes one step further. He says, "Kate, I don't like that hat of yours. Throw it underfoot." She does that as well. Everybody again is totally aghast. Kate and Petruchio start to play off of one another, start to see the fun that they can have. And with the last speech, at least the approach we've taken in our version, and some people may not agree with it, other people will, Kate is having won over on the other women. Petruchio says, "Tell these headstrong women what duty they do owe their husband." And Kate goes into the speech, explaining. Now, for the time, and we have to understand this, there were certain attitudes, and women did not have a prominent place in society. They were considered second-class citizens. For the time, Kate's speech would have been typical of the attitude of the time. Women were totally subservient to men. What we've tried to do to make it more acceptable as to the 20th century, to people thinking in the 20th century, is we've tried to take something else out of it. And we've tried to incorporate the playfulness that we now have between Kate and Petruchio. And Petruchio saying, "Here, let's really set these guys up," because everybody's totally aghast. They still think that she's shrewish. They still think that she's mean. Let's really show them. And then she goes about to regale the other women, and we finally close with a nice embrace between Kate and Petruchio.
Catherine, I charge thee, tell these headstrong women what duty they do owe their lords and husbands.
Fie! Unknit that threatening, unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes. To woo thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty as frost do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, thick, bereft of beauty, and while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch one drop of it. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life, thy king, thy head, thy sovereign, one who cares for thee, and for thy maintenance commits his body to painful labor, both by sea and land, to watch the night in storms, the day in cold, whilst thou, lies warm at home, secure and safe, and craves no other tribute at thy hands but love, fair looks, and true obedience. Too little payment for so great a debt. Even such duty as the subject owes the prince, even such a woman owe it to her husband. And when she is forward, peevish, sullen, and sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul, contending rebel and graceless traitor to her loving lord? I am ashamed that women are so simple, to offer war when they should kneel for peace, to seek for rule, supremacy, and sway when they are bound to serve, love, and obey. Why are our bodies soft and weak and smooth, unapt to toil and trouble in this world, but that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts? Come, you froward and unable worms. My mind hath been as big as one of yours, my heart is great, my reason haply more, to bandy word for word and frown for frown. But now I see our lances are but straws. Our strength is weak, our weakness past compare, and seeming to be that which we indeed least are. So veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hand beneath your husband's foot, in token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready. May it do him ease.
Why, there is a wench! Come on and kiss me, Kate.
Go thy ways, old lad, for thou shalt have it.
Come, my sweet Kate, we'll to bed. We three are married, but you two are spent. 'Twas I won the wager, though you hit the white. And being the winner, God give you good night.
All right, Ken, let's bring the rest of the actors on stage.
Yeah, I think we should meet some of the people that we just seen in the scenes. You want to come on up here and we can get comfortable? I think before we go any further, then it would be good to maybe introduce some of the actors that we have here with us. Of course, I think we should obviously start with ladies first. And we have Audrey Adams, who played Kate.
I need to encourage you.
Bill Boyle played Petruchio. Gary Strong is our Grumio. And last but not least, way over on the far side, is Paul Duncan, who plays Hortensio.
Maybe we should give the audience a chance right now to ask any questions that they might have of the actors or of the play.
I have a question. Audrey, this is directed to you. I just wondered how you feel playing Kate in light of the fact that, well, in light of feminism and all of the things that we've sort of briefly mentioned in talking about the scenes and so forth. How does it make you feel to play a character like that?
I feel okay about it because you've pinpointed precisely the major problem of mounting this show, is to bring it into the 20th century but still be true to the text as far as possible. And I think it's okay for me to play Kate because of the way we do it. And the way we're doing it is basically, neither Petruchio nor Kate are conformists. They're not particularly concerned with society's approval, but they're aware that in order to get by in this world, you have to at least cater to it. So what they do is they play games, you see, and the sort of the cruncher of the show, like the climax of the play, is when Kate finally stops fighting and starts to realize that he's just playing a game, and she can play it as good as he does.
So you feel it's important to let the audience know that that it's not a matter of breaking your spirit, or
oh, definitely, definitely. It's got nothing to do with breaking your spirit.
Yeah, I would think that that would be really difficult to pull out of the text as it is.
It is, it is. I mean, even if you allow for the fact that Shakespeare was definitely a man way well ahead of his time, he was still writing about, I mean, it's relative, the society he was writing about. You know, like I read one text on this show where the guy described a hypothetical performance of the shrew where the women would be standing up, clapping and cheering at Kate's last speech, you know, so, however. But I feel fairly confident that we've solved that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that even though you have to stay true to the time that the play was written in, you have to worry about offending your present audience too, and I think that the approach you've taken is probably the best way to go.
You know, it's an interesting problem because you can do restoration or, say, fairy tales written in the 19th century, and it's perfectly plausible to have a real wet princess and, you know, your knight in shining armor. And we see restoration done like that all the time, and the audience doesn't sit there and go, kill him, take it off the stage. But with this play, like, I don't know about everyone else involved with it, but with me, I thought, we can't do it like that. That's, yes, it's true to how it was meant to be played at the time, but it's just for some reason, this play, you just couldn't do it that way. I think it had something to do with the fact that it was written by Shakespeare, and everyone's experience of Shakespeare's other females has been such that we knew really that there wasn't, I mean, Shrew isn't as cut and dried as it looks on paper. It isn't about a woman being subjugated, you know, and so we've chosen one way of presenting the play.
But by modern interpretation, it is a play about a woman being manipulated. So it is still, even though we've arrived at the best solution we feel, it is still a manipulative play. It will still not escape criticism by feminists.
Oh, yeah.
Which Kate did Petruchio fall in love with? He was intrigued by her, fell in love with her before she became...
the wealthy one.
Yes.
But he could have found someone else wealthy who wasn't Kate, and he fell in love with Kate.
The shrew. What's the point of breaking her?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the game.
Let's not forget that Petruchio went into this thing for money. He really did. I mean, there's no disguising that fact. It was socially acceptable in 1594 to marry for money. Funnily enough, it still is in my day.
But he fell in love with her.
Oh, yes.
And that's the point. He fell in love with her. But she wasn't passive.
He still wanted to modify, to make sure that, I feel, that Petruchio wanted to make sure that the spirit was never lost. But they're channeled into something that they could both enjoy. You know, Kate's spirit is castigated by society in 1594, but it was a wonderful spirit. You just didn't push Kate around. That's today's woman. You don't push today's woman around. She's independent. She's proud. And Kate was. But she was considered a shrew back then. Now she's society's heroine. I think Petruchio fell in love with the spirit.
So in fact, her spirit was not broken. Instead, it was enhanced.
God, we hope it was intact.
Yeah, very much enhanced. Don't just focus on the fact that Petruchio manipulates, because Kate manipulates as much. It's a play about games and about manipulation. I mean, Bianca, as a character, is a really fine example of a little witch, and she manipulates everyone around her, and Kate sees through her, which is basically the source of the conflict between them. So it is very much a play about manipulators.
Yes, Tranio manipulates. You haven't seen Tranio this evening. But Tranio manipulates everybody for the benefit of his master, Lucentio. So everybody's at the game, you know. It's just that we happen to get a lot more out of it than the others, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's
we let Audrey have a chance at explaining how she felt about playing Kate, I have a quotation here, Bill, and it's a comment on the character in the script and not on the actor. Perhaps you could react to it. Petruchio is the same pompous and egocentric ass at the end of the play as he gloats over his wife's obedience that he was at the beginning when he stalked into Padua, beating his servant for misunderstanding him and swearing his intentions to marry wealth.
Yes.
I can vouch for the beating.
And you had no trouble playing him.
I had a lot of trouble playing Petruchio. Fortunately, I worked for a director who allowed me not to play that kind of Petruchio. In any script, you have the license to interpret. Your director interprets and gives you a direction in which to take a role. Our director could have chosen to play Petruchio, the total chauvinist pig. They did a production in Winnipeg of this show. At one point in the show, Petruchio brings Catherine back to his house and deprives her of food, comfort, sleep, clothes, and things that are nice. And we try to make that lighter than the script would suggest at first reading. But in Winnipeg, Petruchio brought Kate back to almost a prison, dirt on the floor. You know, she was filthy, in tatters. He was in magnificent finery. There was dirt on the floor. The place was filthy. He threw food on the floor and ground it in before she could eat it. And that's that Petruchio, and it maintains all the way through. But had my director said to me, "This is how I'm going to do Petruchio," then I would have played that Petruchio.
To go back to the analogy we had earlier, if Kate is today's woman, is Petruchio today's man?
Oh, there's Petruchio in every man walking the face of the earth, believe me.
Me?
Everybody. It's too tempting not to see ourselves you'd like to look at Petruchio and say, well, I'm not like that. But, we are. I just can't pick up the lines right now, but they're there. During rehearsals, when Kate used to do her speech, I used to watch the guys sitting around during rehearsals all going, yeah! Right? True. It really does. You scratch a man and you've got a chauvinist. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, keep trying, girls. We're getting there. Now, give us a break. We're trying hard. But
judicious editing, I think, is required in this segment.
Well, let's not put words in the other actors' mouths. How do they feel?
That's what I feel.
In watching the scenes going on. Here.
Having watched the prime example of a chauvinist playing Petruchio, I can...
Totally convinced. I am mortally wounded.
No, I think, as Bill says, there's the impulse as a man to respond to that with applause and with, yes, that's the way it is. But it's done with humor now. I mean, we can't say to the audience any more than Petruchio and Kate could have played it straight and have it played true to today's audience. You can't say to the audience, yes, go for it, humble, obedient, and all of that. If you smile with it, if you are laughing underneath it, then you have come that further step, if you will. But is the temptation there? Yes. Is that part of what you're going to find under the veneer? Yes.
I think, yeah. One of the things that makes Shakespeare, or has made Shakespeare, work throughout the centuries, is that he has had something to say to every time, to everybody. And I think from our discussion here, we're seeing that, yes, even though the play is 400 years old, it's still saying something about the way we live today, the kind of people we are, because we are, we have been, we are people, and people are people. And we have the same kind of fears and emotions and joys that they've been having for centuries. And I think Shakespeare tapped in on that. And I think that's why people enjoy watching Shakespeare now, today, because they can tune into that and they can get something out of it.
Did you have any feminists step up to you and say, why are you doing that play that runs us down?
No, not really. A few of my friends said that that play is kind of it's not one of their favorite Shakespeare plays before they had seen it. When they came to see our production, they said they liked the interpretation that we did because it was not outrageously about a male chauvinist play. You could see the interplay between Kate and Petruchio, and you knew that they were relating to each other as human beings instead of the dominant male, and he was trying to subjugate Kate. And I think you can also see, as Audrey said, that it's a character like Bianca, who is exterior. Her exterior is she's a lovely, sweet young girl, very pretty, very not totally the opposite of Kate, but when you get down to it, Bianca is terribly manipulative. Of Hortensio, the character I play, falls in love with her, and she takes advantage of that fact to manipulate Hortensio and all her numerous other suitors. So in a way, she is, not in a way, she is worse than Kate in that matter, in that she puts up this facade, which once you scratch that, there's this very manipulative person underneath that. Whereas Kate, I think, is a much more honest character, true character.
There's one additional comment, if I may, that we should make too. We were constrained from playing it the other way for one other reason, which is quite specific. The producer, the stage manager, the set designer, the costume designer, we're all women. And that says a lot about what has happened in the last 400 years too.
We were all very much relieved that our director chose the route that he did.
Yes, yeah. When a director interprets a play like that, do you try to interpret it the way you think it was written and how it was meant to be? Or do you just put your own interpretation on it, blatantly admitting it's your own interpretation?
I think, I don't want to hedge the question, but it is, I think, a bit of both. What you try and look at is the playwright's intent, okay?
Mainly? That's
first,
what you go for.
You go first for the playwright's intent. Then, because the playwright is not, has put something down for you to work with, then you work with it, and you start to do with it the way you would with a piece of clay. You start to mold it and sculpt it.
But you can't help but put yourself.
You can't. No, it's impossible. The same way that each actor.
Winnipeg is no doubt has a very different mentality than you have.
Very much so. Very much so. One of the reasons I liked doing Shakespeare so much is because it allowed me quite a bit of room to put my own feelings into. There is a lot of unspoken text, as it were, in Shakespeare. A lot of business, a lot of interplay and interaction between characters. And I managed to color the script and to color the performance of the actors with my own crayon, as it were, even though I had the coloring book that Shakespeare gave me.
You're very good with similes. Today's man. Coloring book and
well, no, it's just I have
friend let him have his own coloring book for Christmas.
I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, so if my analogies tend towards the coloring books and toy dolls and things like that, you'll understand.
Shannon, there's one interesting point which might be made at this point as well, in terms of the individual artist putting his whatever into it. If that production in Winnipeg had been directed by a woman, it would have made a totally different statement than it did having been directed by a man. So all I'm suggesting is that you can approach it even with the same intent, or with the same result, but with a different intent, and it's going to make a different kind of statement. So the approach, the intent that you as an audience are going to be exposed to has an awful lot to do with the intent that the director leads the group in, and the intent that we as actors bring to the individual roles as well. And you have your own interpretation as audience.
Yeah, and in the final analysis, exactly that. You have your own interpretation. We can work at any theory, at any intent, at any approach, and when you buy your ticket, that entitles you to judge and say, you did that wrong. Okay, that's fair.
What kind of relationship do you think would have carried on after the play was over? If you used your imagination, what kind of relationship do you think you both had?
What a fabulous question.
I know.
Whoa. The sequel. Fabulous question.
I can tell you.
Jaws 2? Never discuss this. You go first. I'll go first. I've already got this idea.
Okay.
That Kate and Petruchio haven't demonstrated beyond any shadow of a doubt that they are surrounded by buffoons, idiots, hidebound society people. Hopefully, would move away to a house in the country or on a beach and have lots of kids.
Do you think that Kate would have become bossy or be the aggressive one in the end, or do you think you'd carry on being the boss? Or?
I like to always feel by the banquet scene that the transition has taken place and Kate is moving into her position to assume the lead.
Do you feel that you just won her over because she really did fall in love with you, and that if she hadn't, that all this wouldn't have happened? She actually did fall in love, otherwise she would have still remained the shrew?
Always she would have been the shrew, because the shrew was a term for a nonconformist woman.
So the fact that she fell in love was the fact that she was willing to submit. Think?
She found no.
Not willing to submit.
No. Well, I shouldn't answer for Kate, but my feeling from the Kate I know on stage is that this is Kate who found a kindred spirit,
well,
whom she could love for its own sake, not for any of. She had to play society's games, but then so did men. To a certain extent.
To a very real extent. Look the way you treated servants.
That's what that last scene is about.
Just a minute, I want to hear your theory about running away and having lots of babies first.
I don't know about the kids.
She would have went to night school, right? Got a degree in medicine.
Very much so.
And then she would have practiced neurosurgery.
What do you feel the future of Kate and Petruchio was?
Neurosurgery.
I really can't answer that question because I think I've got some pretty good reasons for it. First of all, because the thing that happens to Kate as a person in the play is that she goes from being other than what she really is in self-defense. You know, she is a shrew because that's the best way to keep people off her back. You know, and she just wants to go her own way. And suddenly, she doesn't have to be a shrew anymore. So there's going to be a whole starting over process, I think. She is a very immature girl when you start out. I mean, not so much of a girl, she's actually pushing over the hill. And in those days.
Yeah.
And she has grown up a bit. Not because she's learned how to submit, and not because she's been dominated, but simply because she's finally realized that you're only going to get a bloody head if you keep banging your head against the wall. There are other ways to be who you need to be besides alienating everyone around you. And she's found somebody that she feels right down to the soles of her feet comfortable with. And so that's why I can't tell you what Kate would end up doing.
Don't worry, I'll take care of the details.
She would probably lapse back many times.
Beg your pardon?
She would probably lapse back many times into being a shrew.
Oh, I would think
because
it
old
would
habits die hard.
Yeah, and I think it would be quite a patchy process too, because the tendency always in a relationship is to start to take for granted, right? And I don't think either Petruchio or Kate would suffer that for very long, which would make for a fairly feisty relationship.
But interesting.
But interesting, always interesting, yeah.
we've established already with Hortensio and the widow what, by the end of the show, what kind of relationship they're going to have, and it isn't going to be interesting. She's going to, you know, domineer and rule, and he's going to have a very quiet life, likely. Out with the boys a lot, and you know, never come home. And she'll run the household, and we have the same situation with Bianca. At least you're going to have an interesting life, regardless of what direction it takes. It will be.
Well, I think we're going to have fun. I think it's going to be
as long as I do what I'm told.
That's not
And
fun.
so the story goes. And
That's
so the
not
story
fun.
goes.
We've heard some of the male actors say that they got some enjoyment out of the wooing scene and Battle of the Wits. How do the female members of the audience feel about that particular scene? Did you find yourself...
You implied that you scratch any man and you find the chauvinist underneath. Are you implying that all men are basically violent or domineering, that they really would like to be?
Because I don't like that theory.
Well, I don't buy it, and I
don't
not
buy it.
suggest chauvinism from that point of view.
I'm not suggesting that all men are violent.
I
Not by
mean-
any stretch of the imagination.
The man, the male of the species, that it's a...
The male of the species now,
Wants
as he
to know-
exists, is also a conditioned and manipulated person. It isn't difficult.
Not
Look
instinctual.
at television and look at film, and especially television. How many sensitive men do you see on television? How many men cry on television? You know, then we're portrayed as just short of chauvinism. And you can fall into those traps. You can fall into the chauvinistic traps. As to violence, I think you've got to go a long, long way down with a lot of men, because times do change. You know, it was a lot closer to the surface 40 years ago, because that's the way the world was. It was, the wars and things like that. I'm not suggesting that men are outright chauvinists. All men
By
are
instinct.
outright.
You're talking, it's cultural.
Yes.
Yes.
Society.
Yes.
Despite, we're saying we live in a modern age, we have the modern woman and the modern man, but this has only come about recently, and society still, for the most part, there is still a great deal of chauvinism in society, and it's difficult to get out of that as you're conditioned, as you grow up in a society like that. It's sometimes difficult. There are so many men that have these attitudes because they've been conditioned for all their life that way, and things are only beginning to change.
Well, right now, we're having an inquiry in downtown Toronto run by Eli Martel. Violence in Pee-wee hockey, for goodness sake. Violence. And they say, we don't know what to do. And yet, if you say, okay, the first one to raise their fists off the ice and you can't play for the rest of the season, there's a solution.
It's amazing.
But what? And we couldn't have what we witnessed with Montreal and Quebec. We couldn't have that anymore. So we better be careful what we tell the kids here. And so we told them, you really can't be violent until you get to the NHL.
Until you grow up.
We did. We literally told them that. And so here we go on. We're conditioning men still. But, it's all right to change the diapers, fellas, but remember underneath it, you're macho.
Yeah.
You know? We do that. We still do that conditioning.
I think that, in reference to your remark about that particular scene, I think that's about one of the strongest scenes where you can pull out a lot of equality, or as close as you're going to get to it in the whole play, within cultural bounds. Petruchio is probably slightly more dominant physically, of course, the way you've blocked it and staged it and so forth. But just the banter of wits back and forth, there's a real equality there. Nobody tops anybody in that sense. You're always both right on target, and that it makes me question my first remark to you, because I think now, yeah, there are some there's more to the character. There's a lot more depth than maybe appears first on a page.
That's interesting that you see that scene as a battle of equals, because often that scene is played very physically and kind of a wrestling metaphor, which obviously, don't jump on me now, the woman would lose.
Yeah, oh, true.
So how can that be that equal?
Well, yeah, I guess I can agree with that if it were staged slightly differently. You don't allow for an awful lot of physical dominance in the scene, not nearly as much as I have seen it.
Just enough to win.
Yeah.
And that's
right, and that's the point. He won at the end, and the only way he could win at the end was by holding her.
Yeah. In the process of winning,
dominating.
she got away so many times.
And so maybe even it says that you're a little superior, Kate, because you were able to match his wit, his intellect, and you didn't have to resort, or weren't able, whatever you want to say, to the physical force, which is what you had to do.
She slapped me around.
Oh! Yeah, you're right, you did, and you kicked him in the knee.
I mean, where was the violence in the scene?
Petruchio.
So that was equal to.
I wasn't violent to her once.
It was implicit that you could have laid her flat.
But surely that's exactly the point. When I let her slap my face, surely I'm making a statement that says, that's silly. Because if you want to go in for face slapping, I mean, I probably weigh 2 or 3 pounds more than
Oh, you know, we're missing a whole point here in one sense as well. Again, going back to the script. If you look at the whole show, the servants get beat. A lot, okay? A lot.
Oh, yeah.
And we get beat by the ladies and we get beat by the men. And when a servant plays a master, he beats another servant. What we're talking about here is to take it a different direction, if you will, is we're talking about superior versus inferior, regardless of...
Hierarchy.
Exactly. And they began to deal with each other as equals in the sense of, if you want to look at it this way, she slapped him, treating him as a man would. And he responded back, and they got into the wits thing, and they had that on an equal parity basis. And finally, he had to win, so he did that by physical dominance. But if you look throughout the whole show, if you look at the dominant submissive kind of approach to the show, it is a question of hierarchy, which is highlighted to a degree with Petruchio and Kate in a male-female way. But there are other male-female relationships where we know as well by the end of the show that the relationship is just reversed, and that the dominant character in those relationships is going to be female. So it's a question of power.
Except that in those relationships, it's the woman is portrayed as negative when she's in the dominant role, the widow and so forth.
By society today?
Well, that's true in light of the script. Yeah,
I think it comes off negative because it's set up as the counterpoint to this wonderful equality that Kate and Petruchio. I mean, it makes Kate and Petruchio look better by making these Hortensio and Lucentio look like fools, because they waxed lyrical about these charming, wonderful, feminine, gentle creatures that are their wives, and now they've got both men going around the place like this. And that's why that is set up.
I would like to not let your point go by, though. Yes, when a man takes a slap in the face and stands there in his arrogance, staring a woman, that is implicit violence. That is implied violence. Do what you can. I will break your legs any time I choose. Yeah. Your point is well taken, and I don't know what to do about it.
But getting back to the dominant woman being, and it's reflected negatively on her, it's also, I think, reflected negatively on the men who were involved too, because they were so
arrogant.
Yeah, they were romantics. They took a romantic sort of attitude about it, and they weren't being realistic about the situation. And they were, at least in Hortensio's case, he was a fairly weak character who allowed himself to be manipulated in that way. And because his character was weak, he wasn't able to do anything about it. So that's reflected negatively on that character. So I think there's, both sides, it can be negative. Whereas in their relationship, it's basically both a positive sort of thing. They're both on an almost equal basis. And it's a very positive relationship, a very healthy relationship.
Bill, you said earlier that you thought that they'd all move away, and I would think that they'd want to stick around and kind of show everybody in town up for a while longer.
I don't know how... I've, in my day, been a political activist and gotten really tired, you know. I tend to be an armchair activist now. I know everything that's wrong with the world, but I never do go out and solve any of it. And I suspect that, in the end, Petruchio and Kate would tire of the game of trying to educate society. How long do you go on? Fortunately, we have people in society who have lots of energy and never give up and do go on. I'm just not sure Petruchio, I can't speak for Kate, I'm not sure Petruchio had that kind of energy or cared enough about the rest of society to go on and on and on demonstrating where they were in error. No? I don't know. Kate, it's obvious. It would have been nice to show a few more people.
Could you get them to be quiet, please?
Yes.
I'd like to thank you very much for coming tonight and watching the show with us. And I'd like to thank the cast and crew of Theatre Etobicoke for being here tonight. And see you all from Theatre Express. Thank you.